Hi everybody, welcome back to the Zodcast. Today is November 20th, 2022. This upcoming Thursday is Thanksgiving, so I hope everybody has a good, safe Thanksgiving. If you haven't already noticed, this was a shot I took from one of the early Bakersfield College yearbooks called the Renegade Raconteur, and you can see that little symbol in the middle there. This is somewhere outside of Bakersfield. I think it was a wall somewhere near a Native American community or something like that. I can't pronounce the name of the tribe. If I even tried, I would totally humiliate myself. But you can see that symbol there in the middle, and I'll do a little close-up of it. But it's very reminiscent of the flying VF bar ranch from the Red Ryder comic, and of course the little symbol that the Zodiac Killer used outside of his cross circle logo. You can see this one a little close up there. It looks like two backwards uppercase F's, and there of course is the symbol the Zodiac used. Of course I kind of lean towards that coming from Red Ryder, but maybe that comes from a Native American marking or something like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting, just maybe another possible source for that odd symbol that was used by the Zodiac a couple of times. And here's a quick comment from the YouTube channel. It says, from Chris Pike, Drew, Zodiac came alive in a comic book case at Lake Berryessa, then probably shocked that Hartnell survived. He knew to discard the get-up after screwing up and leaving a witness. And DC was that careful, not ALA. That's right on, Chris. That's exactly how I think how it went down. Arthur Lee Allen was not that careful. It's like his buddy Norm Boudreau said, he was a well-meaning screw-up. I do think ALA had a part in this stuff. I do. Too much circumstantial evidence to turn your back on with him, but he played a backseat role to Don Chaney, in my opinion.
I cogitated, I thought about it, and I stewed about it, and eventually I went to the Pomona police and tried to tell somebody there what I thought, and that I suspected that Lee was the Zodiac.
Following is an excerpt from The Sword on the Wall, Japanese Elements and Their Significance in the Mikado by Michael Beckerman. According to Gilbert and Sullivan mythology, the idea for the Mikado occurred to Gilbert when a Japanese sword hanging on the wall of his study fell to the floor. Unlike many mythological events, this one does not appear to have any basis in reality. Gilbert was inspired by a sword, but it remained on the wall. Yet the more dramatic story is repeated endlessly in literature, and lovingly embellished. In one source, the sword falls with a clatter. In another, Gilbert took the sword in his hand and began to cogitate. So the book I quoted from actually was published in the early 1980s, I believe. But the particular quote that I read that said Gilbert took the sword in his hand and began to cogitate comes from another book called Gilbert and Sullivan, Masters of Mirth and Melody, published in 1946 on page 159. So of course that obviously predates the Zodiac crimes, and that definitely looks like a book that the Zodiac would want in his collection if he was a fan of the Mikado. And here is a cover of that book, Gilbert and Sullivan, Masters of Mirth and Melody. I'm actually going to buy that book, and I'll keep everyone updated if I can find any more clues in it.
Was an ideal cop. He was a big, handsome guy, and his name was Stone or Granite or Slate or something on that order, maybe Bullet.
Isn't it interesting that Don Chaney says that cop's name that he reported Arthur Lee Allen to in Pomona was Stone, Granite, or Slate, or something on that order, maybe Bullet. And one of the police officers involved in the Zodiac case had the name Slate. And of course, Detective Dave Slate was the one who famously took the Zodiac Killer's phone call after the Lake Berryessa attack, where the Zodiac said, I want to report a murder, no, a double murder. The kids are parked in a white Carmen Ghia 2 miles north of the park headquarters, something like that. But why do these coincidences just keep coming up with Don Chaney? And of course, this photo I'm showing right now is Detective Slate with Brian Hartnell, and they're listening to the voice of the caller that called into the Jim Dunbar show claiming to be the Zodiac, which was, of course, found later not to be the Zodiac. It was a mental patient, but they are both listening to see if that sounded like the Zodiac Killer that they both heard, either on the phone call for Detective Slate or in person from the Lake Berryessa attack with Brian. And I wanted to show this advertisement for the Crazy Horse Saloon. Of course, this was the one owned in Fairfield, California by Ralph Spinelli. And I was trying to find a photograph of the actual saloon itself, but I could not find it. I don't know, it's probably long since torn down and I couldn't find an old photograph, but I'm still digging. But this is an advertisement for Spinelli's establishment. I believe at the time that he actually owned it. And this reads, "If you think you've seen everything, don't miss the new Crazy Horse Saloon." Of course, it's kind of racy. I believe it was pretty much a strip club, something like Bada Bing from The Sopranos. So you could see Spinelli running an establishment like that. And going back to Spinelli, and his name was Arthur Lee Allen, I think it's interesting when he said that Arthur Lee Allen came to visit him at the Crazy Horse Saloon and said that he could offer his services as a hitman. And Spinelli said, "Look, man, get out of here. I don't want to talk to you, blah, blah, blah." And they kick him out. And he said, "Well, I'm going to prove it to you." And then Allen comes back after the Paul Stine murder and says, "See, do you believe me now?" And then Spinelli supposedly says, "Yeah, I believe you. Now get the hell out of here." So Spinelli was not such a bad guy. Why wouldn't he tell the police that happened? That here's the guy you need to look at for the murder of Paul Stine. Now, I get it that he was a mob-type character in the Vallejo area, and, he probably didn't want the police coming around at all, but he could have made an anonymous phone call if he wasn't all just rotten to the core. But he didn't. So it just makes me wonder if that story has any validity whatsoever. He could have made an anonymous phone call, had one of his subordinates do it, but he never did. So it just makes me wonder. Because, of course, when Spinelli finally did come forward about these stories about Arthur Lee Allen, he had, I believe, 3 different charges for armed robbery against him, and he was trying to make a plea deal. So you got to just throw out that entire testimony from him, unfortunately. That's it for now. Tune into the next video coming up soon. It's going to be about Robert Graysmith's shooting Zodiac. That's going to be a really good one.